I will retrieve my knitting. We're live.
We're live.
Okay, now where was I?
And we're sad.
Are we?
Forever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Chadwick Boseman. Yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he had close to what I had, and it killed him. So I'm really like...
Yeah.
But in other news, we've got some hobbitiness to catch up on. Are we tree bearding?
We're tree bearding. Yeah. We were in the tree beard chapter, but I'm not sure exactly where, and my book's not within reach. So.
Right. Let's see. I remember you reading a hasty word for a thing that has stood here ever since this part of the world was shaped.
Yeah, that's somewhere around where we stopped, like the end of that section, I think.
Yeah, and Mary said, "Where are we going? To one of my homes. You need not trouble about food. And if we decide to part company, I can set you down outside my country at any point you choose." Yeah?
Sounds about right.
All right. Let us go. Holding the hobbits gently but firmly, one in the crook of each arm, Treebeard lifted up first one large foot and then the other and moved them to the edge of the shelf. The root-like toes grasped the rocks. Then carefully and solemnly he stalked down from step to step and reached the floor of the forest. At once he set off with long, deliberate strides through the trees, deeper and deeper into the wood, never far from the stream, climbing steadily up towards the slopes of the mountains. Many of the trees seemed asleep, or as unaware of him as of any other creature that merely passed by. But some quivered, and some raised up their branches above his head as he approached. All the while as he walked, he talked to himself in a long running stream of musical sounds. The hobbits were silent for some time. They felt, oddly enough, safe and comfortable, and they had a great deal to think and wonder about.
Yes.
It's not all that odd, because they live in a world where there isn't any... Beautiful things are good, ugly things are bad. It's a very simple, not at all like our world kind of logic. Boromir turns ugly when he turns when the ring gets him. Like Saruman turns ugly.
Yeah, but like the old forest isn't ugly.
No, but they definitely felt its animosity. They weren't the kind of trust something and then get stabbed in the back trope that you get with a lot of fantasy. You don't really get in Middle Earth.
Not during this age of the world.
No. When Minas Sithil was taken over, it became ugly. Like, yeah, makes life easier. It's like living in Shallow Hal. I expected to hate that movie. I really did enjoy it. I don't think I want to watch it more than once, but I did get it. Like,
yeah, I don't know if it would hold up, but it wasn't as terrible as it seemed like from the trailers, as I recall.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it won me over when he met that woman who was really awful and he was like, hey. And then we see her later and she's stunning, but like ugly in the soul. You remember that bit?
Not really. I don't remember much of that movie. We watched it a long time ago.
Likewise, back in Denver. Went through a Jack Black kick. Still watch School of Rock periodically. That one holds up. Except for the fact that he was never arrested for impersonating a teacher, which I think is more like what would happen.
I mean, probably.
But
You never know at boarding schools, though.
because it was a private school and they decided not to press charges because their children were happier and healthier through the power of rock and roll. See, that's an enduring message. At last, Pippin ventured to speak again. "Please, Treebeard," he said, "could I ask you something? Why did Celeborn warn us against your forest? He told us not to risk getting entangled in it." Did he now?" rumbled Treebeard. "And I might have said much the same if you had been going the other way. Do not risk getting entangled in the woods of Lorelindorrenan. That is what the elves used to call it, but now they make the name shorter. Lothlorien, they call it. Perhaps they are right. Maybe it is fading, not growing. Land of the Valley of Singing Gold, that was it, once upon a time. Now it is the Dream Flower. Ah, well, but it is a queer place, and not for just anyone to venture in. I am surprised that you ever got out, but much more surprised that you ever got in. That has not happened to strangers for many a year. It is a queer land. Woo!
Woo! One second, I need to mute myself.
And so is this. Folk have come to grief here. Aye, they have to grief. Laura Lindor and An Lindalondoro man Malin Nornelion Ornemalin, he hummed to himself. They are falling rather behind the world in there, I guess, he said. Neither this country nor anything else outside the Golden Wood is what it was when Celeborn was young. Still, Tora lilomie tumbale morna tumbale torie lome anor. That is what they used to say. Things have changed, but it is still true in places. Yeah.
Sure, that's what I always say.
It says see Appendix F under Ents, but I don't think I've ever found the actual translation of that phrase.
It could mean anything.
It means whatever you want it to mean. What do you mean? Said Pippin. What is true? The trees and the Ents, said Treebeard. I do not understand all that goes on myself, so I cannot explain it to you. Some of us are still true Ents and lively enough in our fashion, but many are growing sleepy, growing tree-ish, as you might say. Most of the trees are just trees, of course, but many are half awake. Some are quite wide awake, and a few are, getting entish. That is going on all the time. When that happens to a tree, you find that some have bad hearts. Nothing to do with their wood. I do not mean that. Why, I knew some good old willows down the Entwash, gone long ago, alas. They were quite hollow. Indeed, they were falling all to pieces, but as quiet and sweet-spoken as a young leaf. And then there are some trees in the valleys under the mountains, sound as a bell and bad right through. That sort of thing seems to spread. Tell me about it. There used to be some very dangerous parts in this country. There are still some very black patches. Like the old forest away to the north, do you mean? Asked Mary. Aye, something like, but much worse. I do not doubt there is some shadow of the great darkness lying there still away north, and bad memories are handed down. But there are hollow dales in this land where the darkness has never been lifted, and the trees are older than I am. Still, we do what we can. We keep off strangers and the foolhardy, and we train and we teach, we walk and we weed. We are tree herds, we old Ents. Few enough of us are left now. Sheep get like shepherd, and shepherds like sheep, it is said, but slowly, and neither have long in the world. Where would he have heard that? Where does he know shepherds from? Who herds sheep in Middle-earth?
The Rohirrim do.
Are you
Remember?
sure?
They talked about it, that they had moved the herds off of the
I meant
plains.
the horses.
It doesn't say the horses, though. Look. Somebody somewhere has sheep, and I bet it's the Rohirrim. They have good land for it.
You have good land for it. I'll give you that. But slowly, and neither have long in the world. It is quicker and closer with trees and Ents, and they walk down the ages together. For Ents are more like elves, less interested in themselves than men are, and better at getting inside other things. And yet again, Ents are more like men, more changeable than elves are, and quicker at taking the color of the outside, you might say. Or better than both, for they are steadier and keep their minds on things longer. Some of my kin look just like trees now and need something great to rouse them, and they speak only in whispers. But some of my trees are limb-lithe, and many can talk to me. Elves began it, of course, waking trees up and teaching them to speak and learning their tree talk. They always wished to talk to everything, the old elves did. But then the great darkness came, and they passed away over the sea or fled into far valleys and hid themselves, and made songs about days that would never come again. Never again. Aye, there was all one wood once upon a time, from here to the mountains of Loon, and this was just the east end. Those were the broad days. Time was when I could walk and sing all day and hear no more than the echo of my own voice in the hollow hills. The woods were like the woods of Lothlorien, only thicker, stronger, younger, and the smell of the air. I used to spend a week just breathing. Treebeard fell silent, striding along, and yet making hardly a sound with his great feet. Then he began to hum again, and he passed into a murmuring chant. Gradually the hobbits became aware that he was chanting to them. In the willow meads of Tasaranan I walked in the spring. Ah, the sight and smell of the spring in Nan Tasarian, and I said, that was good. Blah, 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 blah. To the pine trees upon the highlands of Dorthonion I climbed in the winter. Ah, the wind and the whiteness and the black branches of winter upon Ord Nathon. My voice went up and sang in the sky. And now all those lands lie under the wave. And I walk in Amberona, in Tauramona, in Aldalome. In my own land, in the country of Fangorn, where the roots are long and the years lie thicker than the leaves, in Tarimornalome. He ended and strode on silently, and in all the wood, as far as ear could reach, there was not a sound. The day waned and dusk was twined about the boles of the trees. At last the hobbits saw, rising dimly before them, a steep, dark land. They had come to the feet of the mountains, and to the green roots of tall methadras. Down the hillside the young Entwash, leaping from its springs high above, ran noisily from step to meet them. On the right of the stream there was a long slope clad with grass, now grey in the twilight. No trees grew there, and it was open to the sky. Stars were shining already in lakes between shores of cloud. Treebeard strode up the slope, hardly slackening his pace. Suddenly before them the hobbits saw a wide opening. 2 great trees stood there, one on either side, like living gateposts, but there was no gate, save their crossing into interwoven boughs. As the old Ent approached, the trees lifted up their branches, and all their leaves quivered and rustled, for they were evergreen trees, and their leaves were dark and polished and gleamed in the twilight. Beyond them was a wide level space, as though the floor of a great hall had been cut in the side of the hill. On either hand the walls sloped upwards until they were 50 feet high or more, and along each wall stood an aisle of trees that also increased in height as they marched inwards. At the far end the rock wall was sheer, but at the bottom it had been hollowed back into a shallow bay with an arched roof, the only roof of the hall, save the branches of the trees, which at the inner end overshadowed all the ground, leaving only a broad open path in the middle. A little stream escaped from the springs above, and leaving the main water, fell tinkling down the sheer face of the wall, pouring in silver drops like a fine curtain in front of the arched bay. The water was gathered again into a stone basin in the floor between the trees, and thence it spilled and flowed away beside the open path, out to rejoin the Entwash in its journey through the forest. Here we are, said Treebeard, breaking his long silence. I have brought you about 70,000 strides, but what that comes to in the measurement of your own land, I do not know. Anyway, we are near the roots of the last mountain. Part of the name of this place might be Welling Hall, if it were turned into your language. I like it. We will stay here tonight. He set them down on the grass between the aisles of the trees, and they followed him towards the great arch. The hobbits now noticed that as he walked, his knees hardly bent, but his legs opened in a great stride. He planted his big toes, and they were indeed big and very broad, on the ground first, before any other part of his feet. For a moment Treebeard stood under the rain of the falling spring and took a deep breath. Then he laughed and passed inside. A great stone table stood there, but no chairs. At the back of the bay it was already quite dark. Treebeard lifted 2 great vessels and stood them on the table. They seemed to be filled with water, but he held his hands over them, and immediately they began to glow, one with a golden and the other with a rich green light. And the blending of the 2 lights lit the bay as if the sun of summer was shining through a roof of young leaves. Looking back, the hobbits saw that the trees in the court had also begun to glow, faintly at first, but steadily quickening, until every leaf was edged with light, some green, some gold, some red as copper, while the tree trunks looked like pillars molded out of luminous stone. I love this imagery, but it makes me think how incredibly conspicuous they must be.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're with Fangorn in Fangorn Forest. Like, who is going to attack them?
Exactly. But I don't even know if people from, like, 100 miles away will be like, what the fuck, is the mountain on fire? Like, what is that? It's not firelight. So course, this is a world where clearly everyone, the dwarves and the elves and the ents, all know how to produce light without wires and without fire. And so I'm thinking maybe they had their own version of Tesla and listened to him.
That's one possibility, certainly.
Yeah. Someone who is like, wait, we can utilize the and make this thing glow.
Or perhaps it's magic. Just putting that out there.
Could be magic. They do use a lot of light. But if you have magic that costs you like it seems to, Gandalf can only do a blazy staff thing once before he's like, oh shit, I need to lie down. Then you probably wouldn't use that to light an entire city. Like Karis Galathon was lit. It was
lit.
It was lit. Of course, they didn't say that those weren't just fire lamps, but you'd think that a tree-dwelling folk would have would minimize their use of fire. I vote technology rather than magic.
I shall ponder it. I'm not sure where my vote is yet.
Okay. At any rate, we have this gorgeous, incredible, glowing valley lighting up the side of the mountain.
Checks out.
Or everybody's used to it, and people and animals for hundreds of miles are like, "Oh, Treebeard's home." Well, now we can talk again, said Treebeard. You are thirsty, I expect. Perhaps you are also tired. Drink this. He went to the back of the bay, and then they saw that several tall stone jars stood there with heavy lids. Moonshine. He removed one of the lids and dipped in a great ladle, and with it filled 3 bowls, one very large bowl and 2 smaller ones. This is an ent house, he said, and there are no seats, I fear, but you may sit on the table. Picking up the hobbits, he set them on the great stone slab 6 feet above the ground, and there they sat, dangling their legs and drinking in sips. The drink was like water, indeed very like the taste of the draughts they had drunk from the Entwash near the borders of the forest, and yet there was some scent or savour in it which they could not describe. It was faint, but it reminded them of the smell of a distant wood borne from afar by a cool breeze at night. The effect of the draught began at the toes and rose steadily through every limb, bringing refreshment and vigor as it coursed upwards right to the tips of their hair. Indeed, the hobbits felt that the hair on their heads was actually standing up, waving and curling and growing. As for Treebeard, he first laved his feet in the basin beyond the arch, and then he drained his bowl at one draught, one long, slow draught. The hobbits thought he would never stop. At last he set the bowl down again. Ah, he sighed. Now we can talk easier. You can sit on the floor, and I will lie down. That will prevent this drink from rising to my head and sending me to sleep. Moonshine! On the right side of the bay there was a great bed on low legs, not more than a couple of feet high, covered deep in dried grass and bracken. Treebeard lowered himself slowly onto this, with only the slightest sign of bending at his middle, until he lay at full length with his arms behind his head, looking up at the ceiling, upon which lights were flickering, like the play of leaves in the sunshine. Merry and Pippin sat beside him on pillows of grass. Now tell me your tale, and do not hurry, said Treebeard. The hobbits began to tell him the story of their adventures ever since they left Hobbiton, They followed no very clear order, for they interrupted one another continually, and Treebeard often stopped the speaker and went back to some earlier point or jumped forward asking questions about later events. They said nothing whatever about the ring, and did not tell him why they set out or where they were going to, and he did not ask for any reasons. He was immensely interested in everything, in the Black Riders, in Elrond and Rivendell, in the Old Forest and Tom Bombadil, in the mines of Moria, and in Lothlorien and Galadriel. He made them describe the Shire and its country over and over again. He said an odd thing at this point. "You never see any Ents round there, do you?" he asked. "Well, not Ents. Entwives, I should really say." "Entwives," said Pippin. "Are they like you at all?" "Yes, well, no. I do not really know now," said Treebeard thoughtfully. "But they would like your country, so I just wondered." Treebeard was, however, especially interested in everything that concerned Gandalf, and most interested of all in Saruman's doings. The hobbits regretted very much that they knew so little about them, only a rather vague report by Sam of what Gandalf had told the council. But they were clear, at any rate, that Ugluk and his troop came from Isengard and spoke of Saruman as their master. "Whom?" said Treebeard, when at last their story had wound and wandered down to the battle of the orcs and the riders of Rohan. "Well, well, that is a bundle of news and no mistake. You have not told me all. No, indeed, not by a long way. But I do not doubt that you are doing as Gandalf would wish. There is something very big going on, that I can see, and what it is maybe I shall learn in good time, or in bad time. By root and twig, but it is a strange business. Up sprout little folk that are not in the old lists, and behold, the 9 forgotten riders reappear to hunt them, and Gandalf takes them on a great journey, and Galadriel harbours them in Cariscalathon, and orcs pursue them down all the leagues of Wilderland. Indeed, they seem to be caught up in a great storm. I hope they weather it." "And what about yourself?" asked Mary. "Oh, I have not troubled about the great wars," said Treebeard. "They mostly concern elves and men. That is the business of wizards. Wizards are always troubled about the future. I do not like worrying about the future. I am not altogether on anybody's side, because nobody is altogether on my side, if you understand me. Nobody cares for the woods as I care for them, not even elves nowadays. Standards are falling everywhere.
You can't get good help.
Nope. Still, I take more kindly to elves than to others. It was the elves that cured us of dumbness long ago, and that was a great gift that cannot be forgotten, though our ways have parted since. And there are some things, of course, whose side I am altogether not on. I am against them altogether. These Murarum, he again made a deep rumble of disgust. These orcs and their masters. Nazis. I used to be anxious when the shadow lay on Mirkwood, but when it removed to Mordor, I did not trouble for a while. Mordor is a long way away, but it seems that the wind is setting east, and the withering of all woods may be drawing near. There is naught that an old Ent can do to hold back that storm. He must weather it or crack. But Saruman now. Saruman is a neighbor. I cannot overlook him. I must do something, I suppose. I have often wondered lately what I should do about Saruman. Who is Saruman? Asked Pippin, excuse me. Do you know anything about his history? Saruman is a wizard, answered Treebeard. More than that I cannot say. I do not know the history of wizards. They appeared first after the great ships came over the sea, but if they came with the ships, I never can tell. Saruman was reckoned great among them, I believe. He gave up wandering about and minding the affairs of men and elves some time ago. You would call it a very long time ago. And he settled down at Angrenost, or Isengard, as the men of Rohan call it. He was very quiet to begin with, but his fame began to grow. He was chosen to be the head of the White Council, they say, but that did not turn out too well. I wonder now if even then Saruman was not turning to evil ways. But at any rate he used to give no trouble to his neighbors. I used to talk to him. There was a time when he was always walking about my woods. He was polite in those days, always asking my leave, at least when he met me, and always eager to listen. I told him many things that he would never have found out by himself, but he never repaid me in like kind. I cannot remember that he ever told me anything. And he got more and more like that. His face, as I remember it, I have not seen it for many a day, became like windows in a stone wall, windows with shutters inside. I think that I now understand what he is up to. He is plotting to become a power. He has a mind of metal and wheels, and he does not care for growing things, except as far as they serve him for the moment. And now it is clear that he is a black traitor. He has taken up with foul folk, with the orcs. Whom? Worse than that, he has been doing something to them, something dangerous. For these Isengarders are more like wicked men. It is a mark of evil things that came in the great darkness that they cannot abide the sun. But Saruman's orcs can endure it, even if they hate it. I wonder what he has done. Are they men he has ruined, or has he blended the races of orcs and men? That would be a black evil. Yeah.
So some slight overtones of racism here.
I was actually just thinking that, yeah, forced mating is always a bad thing. Like, that was the direction my mind went.
Yes, yeah, if he was forcing people to do things, that part is bad, but the whole like blending races being the worst possible thing is that's bad. That's very racist.
Yes, but we have discussed the fact that races aren't races. It's not a one-to-one. Races are ideologies. The races represent ideologies. So taking decent, if a bit egotistical ideologies and mixing them with hateful, destructive, selfish and like, oh, what is the word for it? Shit, my poor brain. Industrial ideologies is a bad thing. If you don't think of the races as races, it's a lot less troublesome because that's a little, and it's a little more accurate to what he was intending too. However, it is an unfortunate turn of phrase.
I was gonna say, yes, we can put all that context on it. It's still a really unfortunate way to put it.
Yeah. Sorry, people.
Anyway, moving on.
About races we would absolutely not agree with. Anyway, Treebeard rumbled for a moment as if he were pronouncing some deep subterranean entish malediction. Oh, I lost a word yesterday. I haven't found it again yet. I need your help. I haven't bothered to Google it or anything, but it's I think it starts with an S or a P, and it's the word that is nostalgic, but or not nostalgic, not quite sympathetic, not superstitious, but when you have like a thing that is special to you from childhood, you feel great.
Not nostalgia?
Not nostalgia. Comment below if you know what I'm talking about.
I have no idea. If it comes to me, I'll let you know.
All right. Some time ago, I began to wonder how orcs dared to pass through my woods so freely, he went on. Only lately did I guess that Saruman was to blame, and that long ago he had been spying out all the ways and discovering my secrets. He and his foul folk are making havoc now. Down on the borders they are felling trees. Good trees. Some of the trees they just cut down and leave to rot. Orc mischief, that. But most are hewn up and carried off to feed the fires of Orthanc. There is always a smoke rising from Isengard these days. Curse him, root and branch. Many of those trees were my friends, creatures I had known from nut and acorn. Many had voices of their own that are lost forever now. And there are wastes of stump and bramble where once there were singing groves. I have been idle. I have let things slip. It must stop. Treebeard raised himself from his bed with a jerk, stood up, and thumped his hand on the table. The vessels of light trembled and sent up 2 jets of flame. They are mood lamps. There was a flicker like green fire in his eyes, and his beard stood out stiff as a great besom. I will stop it, he boomed, and you shall come with me. You may be able to help me. You will be helping your own friends that way, too. For if Saruman is not checked, Rohan and Gondor will have an enemy behind as well as in front. Our roads go together to Isengard. We will come with you, said Merry. We will do what we can. Yes, said Pippin. I should like to see the White Hand overthrown. I should like to be there, even if I could not be of much use. I shall never forget Ugluk in the crossing of Rohan. Good, said Treebeard. But I spoke hastily. We must not be hasty. I have become too hot. I must cool myself and think. For it is easier to shout, stop, than to do it. He strode to the archway and stood for some time under the falling rain of the spring. Then he laughed and shook himself, and wherever the drops of water fell glittering from him to the ground, they glinted like red and green sparks. He came back and laid himself on the bed again, and was silent. After some time, the hobbits heard him murmuring again. He seemed to be counting on his fingers. He's got several fingers. Fangorn, Finglas, Fladrif, aye, he sighed. The trouble is that there are so few of us left, he said, turning towards the hobbits. Only 3 remain of the first Ents that walked the woods before the darkness. Only myself, Fangorn, and Finglas and Fladrif, to give them their elvish names. You may call them Leaflock and Skinbark, if you like that better. And of us 3, Leaflock and Skinbark are not much use for this business. Leaflock has grown sleepy, almost tree-ish, you might say. He has taken to standing by himself half asleep all through the summer with the deep grass of the meadows round his knees. Covered with leafy hair he is. He used to rouse up in winter, but of late he has been too drowsy to walk far even then. Skinbark lived on the mountain slopes west of Isengard. That is where the worst trouble has been. He was wounded by the orcs, and many of his folk and his tree herds have been murdered and destroyed. He has gone up into the high places among the birches that he loves best, and he will not come down. Still, I dare say I could get together a fair company of our younger folks, if I could make them understand the need, if I could rouse them. We are not a hasty folk. What a pity there are so few of us. Why are there so few when you have lived in this country so long? Asked Pippin. Have a great many died? Oh, no, said Treebeard. None have died from inside, as you might say. Some have fallen in the evil chances of the long years, of course, and more have grown tree-ish. But there were never many of us, and we have not increased. There have been no entings, no children, you would say, not for a terrible long count of years. You see, we lost the Entwives. How very sad, said Pippin. How was it that they all died? They did not die, said Treebeard. I never said died. We lost them, I said. We lost them, and we cannot find them. He sighed. I thought most folk knew that. There were songs about the hunt of the Ents for the Entwives, sung among elves and men from Mirkwood to Gondor. They cannot be quite forgotten. Well, I am afraid the songs have not come west over the mountains to the Shire, said Mary. Won't you tell us some more, or sing us one of the songs? No, don't sing a song. Yes, I will indeed, said Treebeard, seeming pleased with the request. But I cannot tell it properly, only in short, and then we must end our talk. Tomorrow we have councils to call, and work to do, and maybe a journey to begin. And I'm going to stop there because Treebeard takes so long.
It takes a very long time to say anything, but he says a great many things.
Yeah, pages and pages and pages. Oh my goodness, Treebeard talks a lot. But he's one of our exposition folk. Not exposition for the plot of the story, just exposition for the world.
It's world building, darling. It has to go somewhere.
Nice misquote. I love it. Oh, Lordy Lou. So yeah.
I keep getting my yarn caught on my hangnail. I really need to cut that.
Yeah.
Anyways.
What you making?
It's gonna be a sweater. That's the neck part. Hang
Cool.
on. There.
Ah. Yes. I've been working out which direction of the screen I'm moving to.
Yes.
I've been working on Iron, and he's a dwarf with like all of the Industrial Revolution piled on his back. And
you were working on him on Wednesday.
That's right. I was. I've had to paint out a whole lot of the details. They're too small. I was working too small. I had my little tiny brush, and I was having a really good time making like 2 little ships and 2 little trucks and a little anvil and little Eiffel Tower and the little city, which still looks pretty cool. But I realized that as a card, all of that's going to be unintelligible nonsense. Like, it's way too small. And besides, it wasn't looking heavy.
Mm-hmm.
He was looking like he was carrying a scene from a Where's Waldo book rather than
a burden.
A burden, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've had to like consolidate the shapes, make everything just a little bigger, and one ship, one truck, one made the anvil a lot bigger. And got the city bigger because the whole thing was also kind of tipping off his back this way, and I kind of needed it to be more, yeah. But it's bearing down and not falling off.
I'm sure he appreciates that.
Right? Yeah, and he's got to look old because they've known about Iron since forever. So.
Are you going to put a meteorite in the background?
I don't think so. Because we're going to have meteorites, or at least maybe not meteorites because they're going to be floating, but there's going to be asteroids in the background for iridium, because that's one of those things that there isn't any of unless it's delivered from space.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you asking? If something was me?
I was talking about how difficult Mercury will be because she's a mermaid, obviously, and she's got to look. Her handle's obsession or something. I'll have to thesaurus it, but something like obsession. I didn't want madness because that's not the only part of the history of Mercury that has any bearing. People have been obsessed with it. People have floated anvils on it. People have gotten pools of it. They thought it was curing for a while. Like, people love this substance, and I was like, I needed something to relate to that, but I'm also thinking I don't want to do an old lady mermaid with it worked for carbon and like potassium and stuff, but it wouldn't work really well for a mermaid. It would look wrong. And I was wrestling with that, and I think it must have been Corin, was like, how about skeletal? And I was like, I can do that. I've already done that. I done a sugar skull mermaid. I just have to tap into that and I'll be fine. It's great. Good. Recycled ideas. Yeah, that's where we're going with that.
Oh, here's a better look at my knitting, by the way, now that I'm not mid-row.
Nice. I like it. I like that yarn.
Isn't it cool? So it's speckled is the term for how they dye it. So it's
Yeah.
just little dots of color. And then it's going to be a gradient with, so there's three other colors. So it's going to start with this white, and then I have a light gray and a slightly darker gray, and then a purple.
Are they all speckled?
Yeah, no, the purple is semi-solid, but the rest of them are speckled.
That
But
is
the
going to
base color is going to slightly darken with each one.
it's going to be so cool. I love
It's gonna.
it.
I'm really excited. I think it's going to be very pretty. So.
Just in time for winter.
Yeah, sure. We'll pretend I'll finish it this winter.
Winter.
That's a good point.
I
Oh, goodness.
I have needing lunch hiccups, so I'm going to go eat lunch.
Sounds like a plan. Well, I will see you on Wednesday.
Okay, I love you. Cuidado.
I love you too, Liamas.
Bye.